Along with the trickster type of stories, we in the Jewish oral tradition have a fool of the world stories. The motif is well known, and if you go to Germany, it's the fools or the wise men of Schilburg. If you go to England, it's the fools or wise men of Gotham, or the fools or wise men of Abdera. Yeah, fools and wise men are used synonymously. But it's called the fool of the world motif. And so somewhere maybe at the very, very end of the 1500s, those German fool stories or wise men stories were translated into Yiddish, the language of the Jews in Eastern Europe. And of course what happens is you take on all the details, the coloration of the Jewish religion and foods and all these other details that make them into the Jewish variant. Well, we have a lot of Helm stories. And you know, you have to also say these words because they're not only to hear them, but to feel them. And so to really feel them in your whole 150 muscles that you need to use for speaking. So say Helm. Don't sit too close to anyone. And they were known as Helmites. You can see the difference between Gotham and Helm. We're very earthy, right? Now, not many of you may know how Helm came to be. By the way, there's an actual town called Helm in Poland. But this legendary town of the Fools of Helm, or the Helmer Naroyim, as they would say in Yiddish, has nothing to do with the actual town. Just know that. You don't come from Helm, do you? God sent out 2 angels with sacks of souls. One angel had a sack filled with beautiful and handsome and intelligent souls, like all of you here. The other angel had a sack of naroyim, foolish souls. And God instructed them to fly everywhere in the world and to distribute these souls equally wherever they flew. But the angel with the sack of foolish souls flew a little too low, or maybe the mountain peak was too high. The sack ripped open, those souls floated down into the valley. They grew up there, they liked the place, they called it Helm, and they were known as Helmites. Now, there are many stories I can tell you. But in Helm, there was a little synagogue, a shul, and they would hear the Torah read, the Torah, but in Yiddish it's Torah. And they would read the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, on Shabbat or Shabbos, on Saturdays, on holidays and other market days, Mondays and Thursdays. And they would also study Talmud, and they would exchange midrashim, the stories. And so they one day heard a midrash about the great debate between the sun and the moon. That God had created these 2 great lights, these 2 great balls of light in the heavens. They were both of equal size, equal brightness, rotating and revolving in the sky, shooting off fireballs at each other. Well, it would actually hit each other because they were so big and so close to each other, that one day the moon began to grumble and went to God to complain. God, I need more space. I need to have my space so I can revolve and move. Because look at me. Look at all my craters and pits because of those fireballs shot off by the sun. The sun should be smaller. That way I'd have more room for myself. God said, I'll have to ask the sun. Sun, are you pleased and satisfied with the way you are? Oh yes, I am. I like my size. And very well, said God to the moon. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, moon. And God made the moon a little smaller, a lot smaller. and then took the moon and sent it off across the world to rotate in the nighttime sky all by itself. Now you have lots of room, moon. But that was not the end of the Midrash, you see. But the Helmites didn't need to hear any more. There suddenly started a debate in Helm as to what was more important, the sun or the moon. The sun! The moon? The moon?
The sun.
And soon there were sun groups and moon groups, and whenever they passed each other on the way to work, they never got to work because they would start debating. And when they would come home, they never got home because in the marketplace somebody would say, oh, the sun is so bright, and the others would say,
The moon is bright. The sun, the moon, the sun.
And so one day the women brought big pot of chicken soup into the marketplace so they could at least eat. And so everybody started eating this golden broth with the big matzo balls and little golden yolks. In Yiddish they're called eierlich, unborn chicken eggs. When I was a child, I used to eat them. My mother would simmer them in the chicken soup. Your mama too, huh? And I haven't had one since I was a child. I don't think chickens make them anymore. So they would start to eat. And have you ever heard a Helmite schlurp soup? It was a delight to hear. He would be slurping, and all of the Helmites were slurping. It sounded like an orchestra tuning up off key. And suddenly, somebody called out, "Oi, this Eile, it looks just like the sun, the moon." What do you mean the sun? The moon. Are you foolish? What? And they began with renewed vigor to debate the sun, the moon, the moon. The chicken soup got cold, spilled, forgotten. They never finished dinner that night. Well, in shul, in the synagogue, every month, the moon renews itself, right? There's a new moon. And so there's a blessing over the new moon to begin the new month, Rosh Chodesh. And so the rabbi began the blessing over the new moon, over the month, Rosh Chodesh. That's all he had to say. Suddenly there was a debate starting again. The moon, the sun, the moon, the sun. And the moon stayed the same and the month never changed. Well, at the end of the Jewish New Year, you have the harvest holiday of Sukkot. And at the very end, there's another holiday called Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is when you finish reading the 5 books of Moses with the death of Moses, and you begin seamlessly in the beginning all over again with the book of Genesis, Bereshit. And so they had just finished the ending of the last book, of the 5th book, and they were about to begin with in the beginning, when suddenly a voice called out in the back, "Oi, look how beautiful this is. The Torah ends and begins all over again like a circle. It's round like the moon." And suddenly somebody called out,
The sun.
"Oh." Finally, the rabbi was pounding on the bima for quiet, or they wouldn't be able to continue reading, and the world would not be created again. And finally, everybody settled down, and so they began to read. Bereshit bara Elohim, es hashamayim v'es haaretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. And God creates something each of the 6 days of creation before God rested on Shabbos, the 7th day. So they are reading what's the first day, the second day, the third day. On the 4th day, God created the sun, then the moon. They never got to the stars. Finally, the debate started again, arguing, agonizing, debating, discussing, until finally the elders of Helm said, "Wait, we must end this debate." You know who the elders of Helm are? The men with the highest foreheads and the longest beards. We must settle this dispute once and for all. What would you do in Helm to settle such a dispute? No?
Call it a tie.
What?
Declare a draw. Tie.
Declare a draw with the Helmites? Are you crazy? Hosadea, what? What would you do?
Ask 3 questions.
Ask 3 questions. Oh, yeah, you wouldn't even get to the second one.
Find something new to argue about.
What?
Find something new to argue about.
Oh, but they wouldn't let go of this debate. No, the sun and the moon. And you wouldn't go to the HOKHMA Rebbe, believe me. So they decided to take a vote. Because that's how you settle disputes in a democratic society, right? How many of you say the sun is more important?
Yes.
How many of you say the moon is more important? Boy, not too many. I see you. Well, in Helm, well, first of all, let me ask you, how many of you are afraid to be wrong? In Helm, they were never afraid to be wrong, and they decided that the moon is more important. And you know why? In the daytime you have daylight, you don't need the sun. At night when it's dark, that's when you need the moon. And if you understand that logic, there may be a little bit of Helmite in you. So let me take you on one little more of a detour through Helm. You remember there were mountains? That mountain that the sack ripped open on, yeah? So the Helmites climbed those mountains, and they would chop down the trees and carry the logs down the mountain. So one day a stranger came to Helm and said, "What are you doing, Meshubeh Hosadea? You don't carry logs down a mountain. What do? Aha, they said. So they picked up the logs, they brought them back to the top of the mountain, and then they rolled them down. And that's a detour through Helm.